I woke up to the smell of expensive cologne, stale champagne, and regret. Not my regret, mind you. I didn't even know where I was. One minute, I was a very average, very tired 26-year-old office assistant named Kevin, drowning in spreadsheets and instant ramen at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The next, I was opening my eyes to a ceiling so high it qualified as atmospheric, lying in a bed that probably cost more than my student loans, wearing silk pajamas that felt like a cloud and a lie. My head didn't hurt. That was the first red flag. If I'd actually drunk enough champagne to warrant this level of disorientation, I'd be praying for the sweet release of death right now. Instead, I felt fine. Better than fine. My skin was weirdly soft, my hair was weirdly long, and when I sat up, the reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror across the room made me freeze. That wasn't me. That was a stranger. A beautiful stranger, admittedly a Euro, pale skin, sharp collarbones, dark hair that fell past his shoulders in waves, and eyes the color of warm honey. But still, not me. Not the guy who ate leftover pad thai for breakfast and considered, grooming, to be remembering deodorant. "Oh no," I whispered. The voice that came out was softer than mine. Melodic. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who had never once screamed at a printer. I scrambled out of the bed a bed the size of a small country and immediately noticed the room. Marble floors heated from beneath. A chandelier that looked like it had been stolen from a European palace. A closet visible through an open door that was literally the size of my old apartment. And everywhere, the subtle, oppressive scent of money. Then the memories hit. Not like a gentle tide. Like a tsunami. Elias Vane, that was the name attached to this body. 24 years old. Orphan. Companion Euro, which was a very polite word for what he actually was Euro, to one Julian Ashford, billionaire industrialist, youngest CEO in the history of the Ashford Group, and according to every gossip blog in the city, the coldest man alive. Julian Ashford. The name rang a bell even in my original world. He was the villain of a BL web novel I'd read during a particularly bleak flu season Euro, The CEO's Frozen Heart, or something equally melodramatic. I'd mainlined it in 3 days along with NyQuil and Regret. Julian was the antagonist. Beautiful, cruel, calculating. He collected people like trophies and discarded them like tissues. And Elias? Elias was the pathetic lover he kept around for 2 years a pretty, clingy doormat who spent the entire novel crying, begging, and eventually getting publicly humiliated before being thrown out onto the street with nothing. The novel's opening chapter, which I'd found tedious even while feverish, began with Julian coming home from a business trip and wordlessly handing Elias an envelope. Inside, a termination of their arrangement, a check for $50,000, and instructions to be gone by morning. Elias had sobbed, begged on his knees, clutched Julian's designer trousers and wailed about love and devotion while Julian looked down at him with the emotional investment of someone watching paint dry. It had been painful to read. I remembered thinking, just take the money and run, you idiot. And now I was him. Okay, I said to my reflection. The beautiful, tragic reflection. Okay, don't panic. You've read the novel. You know what happens. You know when it happens. I closed my eyes and rifled through Elias's memories like a filing cabinet. Julian had left yesterday for Tokyo. He was returning today. In the original timeline, he'd arrive at 7 p.m., go straight to his study, and send a text summoning Elias. Then he'd hand over the envelope with the same enthusiasm one might use to return a library book. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 3:47 p.m. I had 3 hours and 13 minutes. In the novel, Elias had spent those hours cooking Julian's favorite dinner, lighting candles, and putting on the blue sweater Julian once said looked acceptable. He'd been so desperate to remind Julian of their love that he'd basically gift-wrapped his own humiliation. I looked around the room my gilded cage for the past 2 years and felt something dangerous. I felt absolutely nothing. Not fear. Not sadness. Not the desperate, clinging attachment that had defined Elias Vane's entire personality. Just a profound, almost spiritual sense of opportunity. $50,000. A closet full of designer clothes. A body that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. And most importantly, the foreknowledge of exactly when the axe was going to fall. I didn't have to be the crying ex-lover in the rain. I could be the guy who left first. The thought hit me like lightning, and I started laughing. Actually laughing in Julian Ashford's penthouse, in Elias Vane's beautiful body, at the sheer beautiful irony. Oh. F it all. Sorry, Julian, I said to the empty room. But Kevin's driving now. And Kevin has seen this episode. He knows how it ends. I rolled up my metaphorical sleeves, the silk ones, very fancy, and got to work. First things first, I needed to know exactly what I was working with. I marched into the closet and flicked on the lights. The space was obscene. It was bigger than my childhood bedroom, with custom lighting, cedar shelves, and enough designer merchandise to stock a boutique. Elias's clothes on one side a sea of soft neutrals, cashmere, and carefully curated elegance. Julian's on the other sharp suits, dark colors, the uniform of a man who wanted the world to know he was expensive and dangerous. I ran my hand along Elias's things. Beautiful. Impractical. Most of it had been chosen by Julian's personal shopper according to his preferences. Very little of it looked like something a person could wear while, say, building a new life. Right, I muttered. Packing list. I grabbed a large leather duffel bag from the top shelf Julian's, probably used for weekend trips to his Hamptons property. It would do. Into the bag went. The cashmere coats. All 3 of them. Those would sell for thousands even secondhand. The watches. Elias had 4, all gifts from Julian, all worth more than my old car. I wasn't sentimental enough to leave them. The small velvet jewelry box hidden in a sock drawer. Inside, a platinum bracelet, cufflinks, and a ring that Julian had given Elias on their 1-year anniversary. In the novel, Elias had thrown himself at Julian's feet clutching this ring. I unceremoniously dropped it into a Ziploc bag. Pawn shops didn't care about symbolism. Shoes. Only the comfortable ones. 2 pairs of designer sneakers, 1 pair of boots, and the leather loafers that looked like they could survive actual walking. Clothes. I bypassed the delicate silks and grabbed jeans, sweaters, plain t-shirts, and the one leather jacket that looked like it belonged to a person with a personality. The emergency cash. Elias kept it in a hollowed-out book on the shelf $5,000 in crisp hundreds. For emergencies. This qualified. Documents. Passport, birth certificate, social security card, the works. I found them in a locked drawer that Elias had apparently never bothered to lock, the key sitting in the pen cup next to it. Typical. The laptop. A sleek, top-of-the-line model that Julian had replaced last month. It was technically shared, but used exclusively by Elias for online shopping and crying over Julian's Instagram. The prepaid phone. Elias had bought it secretly 6 months ago, terrified Julian would find out. He'd never used it. I pocketed it along with the charger. I was methodical. Ruthless. I packed like a man evacuating before a hurricane, which wasn't far from the truth. When the bag was full, I dragged it to the bedroom and went hunting for the real prize. The check. In the novel, Julian gave Elias $50,000 as a severance. But I knew something Elias didn't. Julian's assistant had prepared the paperwork 3 days ago. The check was already in Julian's study, sitting in a manila envelope with Elias's name typed neatly on the front. Julian believed in efficiency. He didn't believe in making Elias wait while he wrote a check. Everything was prepared. Clinical. Cold. I found the study unlocked Julian trusted his security system more than locks and there it was. On his desk, next to a fountain pen and a glass paperweight that probably cost more than my former annual salary. Elias Vane, the envelope. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, the check, the termination letter, and a typed note informing me that my belongings would be removed by security if not collected within 48 hours. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket and walked out. Let Julian think I hadn't seen it yet. Let him think he was still in control. I had 3 hours. I used them wisely. I showered quickly, because Elias's hair routine apparently took 45 minutes, and I didn't have 45 minutes. I dressed in dark jeans, a fitted black turtleneck, the leather jacket, and the most comfortable boots. I pulled Elias's long hair into a low ponytail and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked different. Less fragile. The eyes were the same honey color, but they held something new, a sharpness and awareness. I wasn't Elias Vane, the abandoned lover. I was a man who knew the ending and had decided to write a different one. At 6:15 p.m., I called a car service using the prepaid phone. I requested pickup at the service entrance in 15 minutes. At 6:30 p.m., I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, took one last look at the penthouse that had been my prison for 2 years, and walked out. I didn't leave a note. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. Julian Ashford arrived at 7:03 p.m. He was late, which was unusual. A typhoon in Tokyo had delayed his flight by 3 hours, and he'd spent the entire journey reviewing quarterly reports and ignoring the persistent, unfamiliar sensation that something was wrong. It wasn't anxiety. Julian didn't experience anxiety. It was impatience. A desire to be home, which was ridiculous because his penthouse had never been anything more than a convenient location for sleeping and occasionally eating. And Elias, of course. Elias, who would be waiting with dinner and soft words, and that look that unbearable, clinging look that Julian had grown to despise over the past 6 months. He was tired of it. Tired of the expectation, the neediness, the way Elias's entire existence seemed to revolve around Julian's moods. He'd made the decision in Tokyo, final and absolute. The arrangement had run its course. It was time to end it cleanly, efficiently, and without unnecessary emotional display. Julian prided himself on his emotional discipline. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He certainly didn't cry. He simply made decisions and executed them. The termination letter was already prepared. The check was generous, €1, more than generous, really, considering Elias had contributed nothing to the relationship beyond decorative presence. Julian had even instructed his assistant to find Elias a small apartment for the first 3 months, paid in advance. He was being humane. More than humane. He stepped out of the private elevator and into the penthouse foyer, loosening his tie with precise fingers. "Elias," he called. Silence. Julian frowned. The penthouse felt different. He couldn't pinpoint how exactly. The temperature was correct. The lighting was correct. But something was off. He walked into the living room. No candles. No music. No scent of cooking from the kitchen. "Elias," he said again, louder this time. Nothing. A strange sensation began in Julian's chest. He ignored it and went to the study. The envelope was still on his desk, exactly where he'd left it. Untouched. He stared at it for a long moment. Elias always came to greet him. Always. Even when Julian had made it clear through silence, through absence, through the simple withdrawal of attention that he didn't want to be greeted. Elias had always been there, a beautiful shadow, waiting. Julian pulled out his phone and texted, "Where are you?" No response. He called. It went straight to voicemail. Julian stood in the center of his study, surrounded by the artifacts of his immense success, and felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. He felt uncertain. He walked to the bedroom. The bed was made Elias always made the bed but something was wrong. Julian opened the closet. His side was untouched. Perfectly arranged suits, shoes, accessories. Elias's side. Elias's side had gaps. The leather jacket Julian had always hated was gone. The comfortable boots Elias wore when he thought Julian wasn't looking. The cashmere coat Julian had given him last Christmas. Julian's jaw tightened. He checked the drawers. The watch box was missing. The emergency cash €1. He'd known about the hollow book, of course. He knew everything that happened in his home €1 was gone. He found the note 15 minutes later. Not a goodbye letter. Nothing so dramatic. Just a single sheet of paper from the kitchen notepad, written in Elias's elegant, looping handwriting. Asterisk, don't bother with the envelope. I already know what it says. Asterisk. Consider this my resignation. €. Julian read it 3 times. Then he crumpled it in his fist and threw it across the room. What, he said to the empty penthouse, his voice dangerously soft, the hell. I checked into a hotel at 8:45 p.m. Not just any hotel, €, a mid-range business hotel near the financial district, the kind with clean sheets, decent Wi-Fi, and absolutely no memory of who I was. I paid in cash for 3 nights, used a fake name that I made up on the spot, Alex Carter, very original, very untraceable, and took the elevator to the 7th floor with my duffel bag digging into my shoulder. The room was small. The bed was adequate. The view was a brick wall. It was perfect. I dropped the bag, kicked off my boots, and fell backward onto the mattress with a groan that was half relief, half disbelief. I was out. I was free. I had €. I did a quick mental inventory, €, approximately $55,000 in liquid assets, a closet's worth of resaleable designer goods, a laptop, and the foreknowledge of every major plot point in a best-selling BL novel. Not bad for a Tuesday. I ordered room service, €, a burger, fries, and a milkshake, because no one was watching my figure for Julian Ashford's approval, €, and while I waited, I opened the laptop and started planning. First, money. $55,000 wouldn't last forever in this city, but it was enough for a solid start. I needed to liquidate the watches and jewelry. I needed to find an apartment, €, small, anonymous, month to month. I needed a job, or better yet, a way to make money that didn't require me to be Elias Vane, professional, beautiful doormat. Second, identity. I couldn't be Elias Vane anymore. That name came with baggage, expectations, and a very angry billionaire who was probably, right now, realizing that his carefully planned dismissal had been preempted. The thought made me grin. I wondered what Julian's face looked like when he found the note. I wondered if he'd been confused, or angry, or €, most unlikely of all, €, hurt. Probably angry. Julian Ashford didn't get hurt. He got even. Well, let him try. The burger arrived. I ate it in bed, watching a terrible reality show on the hotel TV, and felt a happiness so profound it bordered on religious. This was what freedom tasted like. Greasy, caloric, and entirely mine. At 11 p.m., I turned off the TV and checked my phone, €, the prepaid one, not Elias's old number, which I'd left on the kitchen counter like the artifact of a dead civilization. 3 missed calls. All from Julian's private number. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I blocked the number, turned off the phone, and went to sleep. Julian didn't sleep. He sat in his study until 3 a.m., reviewing the security footage from the building's cameras. He watched Elias, his Elias, soft and beautiful and usually so pliant, walk out the service entrance at 6:31 p.m. with a duffel bag over his shoulder and an expression Julian had never seen before. Elias looked determined, calm, almost happy. Julian rewound the footage, watched it again, and again. The Elias he knew didn't walk like that. The Elias he knew drifted, floated, moved with the hesitant grace of someone who wasn't sure of his welcome. This Elias strode, shoulders back, chin up, like a man with somewhere to be. At 4 a.m., Julian called his head of security. Find him, Julian said. Mr. Ashford, the man said carefully. Mr. Vane is an adult. He left voluntarily. There's no €. Find him, Julian repeated, his voice dropping to a register that made grown men nervous. I don't care what it costs. I want to know where he is, what he's doing, and who he's with. Every hour. Every day. Until I say otherwise. He hung up and poured himself a whiskey he didn't drink. The penthouse was too quiet. Julian had always appreciated silence, Elias's constant need to fill it with conversation had been one of the things that grated most. But now the silence felt heavy. Accusatory. He walked to the bedroom. The bed was still made with hospital corners. The bathroom was still stocked with Elias's products, €, the expensive skincare, the hair oil, the cologne that Julian had once said smelled tolerable and that Elias had worn every day since. Julian picked up the cologne bottle, held it to his nose. Tolerable. It had been more than tolerable. It had been familiar, comforting, even though Julian would never have admitted that out loud. He put the bottle down and stepped back, disgusted with himself. This was ridiculous. He'd been planning to end things anyway. Elias had simply accelerated the timeline, saved Julian the trouble of the conversation, the tears, the inevitable scene. So why did he feel like he'd lost something? Julian Ashford didn't lose things. He discarded them. There was a difference. He went to his study and worked until dawn, burying himself in numbers and contracts and the familiar, soothing logic of business. But every time he looked up, his eyes drifted to the empty chair across from his desk, the chair where Elias used to sit, quiet and watchful, waiting for Julian to acknowledge his existence. The chair was empty now. Julian had wanted it empty. He told himself he was satisfied. He almost believed it. I spent my first week of freedom being very, very busy. I sold the watches first. A discreet dealer in the Diamond District gave me $12,000 for the lot, no questions asked. The jewelry followed another $8,000. The cashmere coats went to a consignment boutique that specialized in gently used luxury. I kept the leather jacket. It was growing on me. By day 5, I had $73,000 in a new bank account under the name Vane €. I couldn't completely abandon the identity yet, not without forged documents I didn't know how to obtain €, and a lead on a studio apartment in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which was real estate speak for not gentrified yet, but getting there. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up, with exposed brick, a window that actually opened, and a kitchenette that could fit one person comfortably or 2 people if they were in love. I signed the lease for 6 months, paid up front in cash to avoid credit checks, and spent my first night on an air mattress eating Thai food from containers. It was the best night of my life. On day 6, I got a job. Not a good job, necessarily. A coffee shop job. But it was 3 blocks from my apartment, the owner didn't ask too many questions, and the uniform was just a black t-shirt and an apron. I learned to make lattes with foam art that looked like abstract disasters. I memorized the regulars' orders. I came home smelling like espresso and steamed milk, and I loved every second of it. Because it was mine. Because no one had given it to me. Because Julian Ashford wouldn't have been caught dead in a place like this, and that made it perfect. I started going by Eli instead of Elias. It felt like a compromise, close enough to my real name that I'd respond, different enough to feel like a new start. The customers liked me. I was good at remembering faces, at small talk, at making people feel seen. It turned out that Elias's gentle nature, the part that wasn't crushed under Julian's indifference, was actually an asset in customer service. Who knew? On day 10, I dyed a streak of my hair blue. Just a small one, hidden beneath the top layer so it was only visible when I tied my hair back. But every time I caught a glimpse of it in the mirror, I smiled. It was a rebellion so small Julian would have laughed at it, but it was mine. I was happy. Or at least, I was something close to happy. A happiness that was cautious, new, still learning how to exist without permission. Then, on day 12, Julian Ashford walked into my coffee shop. I was behind the espresso machine when the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately, I was trying to coax a particularly temperamental machine into producing something resembling milk foam, but I felt the shift in the room's energy before I heard his voice. The coffee shop went quiet. Not completely silent, but the kind of hushed awareness that happens when someone with too much presence enters a space designed for normal people. Elias. My hand didn't shake. I was proud of that. I finished the foam, set the pitcher down, and looked up. Julian Ashford stood at the counter, and he looked. He looked terrible. Not visibly, of course. He was still Julian, 6'2", of tailored charcoal suit, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a coin, eyes the color of glacier ice. He was still impossibly expensive, impossibly controlled, impossibly beautiful. But there were shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth. And his hands, I noticed, because I used to watch his hands constantly, cataloging every gesture like a lovesick archaeologist, were clenched at his sides. We're out of the Ethiopian blend, I said. But the Guatemalan is decent if you like chocolate notes. Julian blinked. It was the first time I'd ever seen him genuinely surprised, and I stored the moment away like a trophy. "What," he said slowly, "are you doing?" "Working." I wiped my hands on my apron. "Is there something I can get you, Mr. Ashford? Coffee? Muffin? Life advice?" His jaw tightened. "You blocked my number." "I did." "You left without speaking to me." "I did." "You took things that didn't belong to you." I leaned on the counter, close enough to smell his cologne Euro, the same one he'd always worn, sharp and expensive and somehow, now, slightly nauseating. "I took my clothes, my jewelry, and my emergency cash," I said calmly. "If you're referring to the $50,000 check, I didn't touch it. It's still in your envelope, as far as I know. Unless you gave it to someone else." "Did you give it to someone else, Julian?" His eyes flashed. "Don't be childish." "I'm not being childish. I'm being efficient." I smiled, and it wasn't Elias's soft, hopeful smile. It was something sharper. "You taught me that, didn't you? Efficiency above all. No unnecessary emotional displays." "I simply applied your principles to our situation." "Our situation," Julian repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You walked out on me. I walked out before you could throw me out. There's a difference." I straightened up. "Now, are you going to order something?" "Because I have a line." There was no line. The coffee shop had emptied the moment Julian entered, customers sensing tension like animals sensing a storm. But the words landed anyway, and I watched Julian's composure crack a euro, just slightly, just enough to show the man beneath the armor. "You didn't even fight for us," he said, and there was something raw in his voice that I didn't recognize. You didn't try." I stared at him. For a moment, I was back in the novel, watching Elias beg and cry and debase himself for a man who looked at him with clinical detachment. I felt a surge of anger a euro, not Julian's anger, but mine. Kevin's. The anger of someone who had watched a character he liked destroy himself for nothing. "I fought for 2 years, Julian," I said quietly. "I cooked your favorite meals. I wore the clothes you chose. I waited up for you every night, even when you didn't come home. I learned your moods, your silences, your schedules. I made myself small enough to fit in the spaces you left empty. And you know what I got in return?" Julian was very still. "A termination letter," I continued. "Prepared 3 days before you even came home. A check. Instructions to be gone by morning. You didn't want to fight, Julian. You wanted a clean execution. And I just skipped to the end. I was going to explain a euro. You were going to hand me an envelope and expect me to cry." I shook my head. "I'm not going to cry for you anymore. I cried enough for 2 lifetimes. This one belongs to me." Julian reached across the counter. His hand closed around my wrist a euro, not hard, but firm, the way he used to hold me when he wanted my attention, when he wanted to remind me who was in control. "Come home," he said, and his voice was almost gentle. Almost. "We'll talk. Properly. Il euro." "You'll what?" I didn't pull away. I let him hold my wrist and looked him in the eye. "Extend my contract? Give me a raise? Tell me what I did wrong so I can fix it." "Ilias euro." "My name is Eli." Something flickered in his expression. Confusion, maybe. Or hurt. It was hard to tell with Julian. He'd spent so long burying his emotions that even he seemed to have forgotten where he'd put them. "Eli," then he said. "Come home. Please." The please almost got me. Almost. 2 years of Elias's memory surged up a euro, the rare moments when Julian was soft, when he let his guard down, when he looked at Elias like he was the only thing in the world. They'd been so few, so precious, that Elias had built his entire existence around earning them. But I wasn't Elias. Not anymore. "I don't have a home with you, Julian," I said. "I have a residence. A very nice one. But a home is where you're wanted, and you made it very clear that you didn't want me. You just didn't expect me to believe you." I gently extracted my wrist from his grip. Turned back to the espresso machine. My hands were steady. "The Guatemalan is on the house," I said. "Consider it a parting gift. Goodbye, Julian." He stood there for a long moment. I could feel his gaze on my back, heavy and searching, trying to find the Elias he knew in the stranger I'd become. "This isn't over," he said finally. I didn't turn around. It was over before it started. You just didn't notice. The door chimed as he left. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then I walked to the bathroom and threw up my breakfast. Not because I was weak. Not because I wanted to take him back. Because I'd finally said everything Elias never could, and it felt like cutting out a tumor. Painful, necessary, and the first step toward actually healing. Julian didn't go home. He sat in his car a black Mercedes that cost more than most houses €, and stared at the coffee shop window. He could see Elias through the glass, moving with efficient grace, smiling at customers, completely at ease in a world Julian didn't recognize. Who is this person? Not the Elias who used to wait by the door, trembling with hope every time Julian came home. Not the Elias who cried silently into his pillow when he thought Julian was asleep. Not the Elias who would have crawled across broken glass for a kind word. This Elias Eli was sharp, self-possessed, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the clothes Julian bought him and everything to do with the light in his eyes. Julian had never seen that light before. Not once in 2 years. He called his assistant. "Cancel my afternoon." "Sir, you have the Henderson merger euro. Reschedule." He hung up and kept watching. Over the next 3 hours, Julian observed Elias with the same intensity he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. He noted the blue streak in his hair when had that happened? He catalogued the easy rapport with customers, the way people lit up when he remembered their names. He watched Elias handle a difficult customer with patience and charm, diffusing tension with a smile that was genuine rather than performative. This wasn't the Elias Julian knew. The Elias Julian knew had been anxious in social situations, clingy, desperate for approval. This person was comfortable, happy. Julian felt something twist in his chest. It took him a moment to identify the sensation. It was jealousy. Not of the customers, though that was part of it, but of Elias himself. Julian was jealous of the peace on his face, the ease in his shoulders, the simple contentment of a life without Julian Ashford in it. The realization was like a physical blow. He'd spent 2 years with this man and had never once made him look like that. Had never seen him smile with his whole heart. Had never given him the space to become whoever this was. Julian had wanted a beautiful accessory, and he'd been furious when the accessory developed needs, expectations, emotions. He'd withdrawn his affection like a punishment, waiting for Elias to conform, to shrink, to become manageable again. Instead, Elias had left. And now Julian was sitting in a parked car like a stalker, watching the only person who had ever genuinely loved him build a life that didn't include him. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. "Shall we continue surveillance on Mr. Vane?" Julian stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, *no. Stand down, *. He didn't drive away. He sat there until Elias's shift ended, until he watched him pull on his leather jacket and walk out the back door, until he saw him turn down a street Julian didn't recognize, heading toward a home Julian had never seen. Then, and only then, did Julian start the engine. He didn't go back to the penthouse. He went to his office, to the 47th floor of the Ashford Group Tower, and he sat behind his desk in the dark. For the first time in his life, Julian Ashford admitted that he had made a mistake. Not in wanting to end things. Maybe that had been inevitable. But in how he'd treated Elias while they were together. In taking his devotion for granted. In confusing his love for weakness. Julian didn't know how to fix it. He didn't know if it could be fixed. But he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he had to try. The flowers arrived on Monday. 24 white lilies, expensive and excessive, with a card that read simply, *I'm sorry. €, J*. I stared at the delivery person, then at the flowers, then back at the delivery person. "There's been a mistake," I said. "Elias Vane? Apartment 4B. Eli," I corrected automatically. "And yes, but I didn't order these. They're a gift." The delivery person thrust them into my arms and left before I could argue. I took the lilies inside and put them on my kitchen counter. They were beautiful. They were also completely wrong €. Lilies were Julian's mother's favorite flower, not mine. In 2 years, he'd never once asked what I liked. I gave them to my neighbor, a sweet elderly woman named Mrs. Chin who thought I was such a nice boy. On Wednesday, the chocolates came. A box from a patisserie that required reservations 3 months in advance. I brought them to the coffee shop and let my coworkers devour them. On Friday, a watch. Vintage Rolex, probably worth more than my annual salary at the coffee shop. I sold it online and used the money to buy a proper bed. The gifts continued for 2 weeks. Each one more expensive, more impersonal, more Julian. It was like he was trying to buy his way back into my life using the same currency that had defined our relationship: money, status, the assumption that enough wealth could solve any problem. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't call. I didn't text. I threw away the cards unread. Then, on the 15th day, there was no gift. Instead, Julian walked into the coffee shop at 7 a.m., wearing jeans and a sweater that didn't have a designer label, and ordered a Guatemalan coffee. Large, he said. Black. And one of those. He pointed at the pastry case, looking slightly lost. The twisted things with cinnamon. Morning buns, I supplied. That'll be $8.50. He paid with cash, €1, actual cash, which I'd never seen him handle before, €1, and took his coffee to a corner table. He pulled out a laptop and proceeded to work? In a coffee shop? Like a normal person? I ignored him. Mostly. Okay, I glanced at him approximately every 47 seconds, but I was only human, and Julian Ashford in casual clothes was a sight I hadn't been prepared for. He stayed for 4 hours. Ordered 2 more coffees. Left a $100 tip in the jar. He came back the next day. And the day after that. By the end of the week, he'd become a fixture. He never approached the counter except to order. He never tried to talk to me during my shifts. He just sat there, working. Occasionally looking up when I laughed at something a customer said, his expression unreadable. My coworkers thought he was mysterious and hot. I thought he was playing a long game I didn't understand. On the 10th day of Julian's coffee shop residency, I finally snapped. I marched over to his table during my break and sat down across from him without invitation. What are you doing? Julian looked up from his laptop. He didn't seem surprised to see me. Working. You have a corner office in a skyscraper. The Wi-Fi is better here. The Wi-Fi is mediocre at best. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The coffee is better then. You don't even like coffee. You drink tea. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, splash of milk. You used to complain that coffee was uncivilized. Julian closed his laptop. I used to complain about a lot of things. We stared at each other. He looked different in the morning light, €, younger, somehow, without the armor of his suits and his scowls. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. Or maybe they had been, and I'd been too busy trying to please him to notice. The gifts have to stop, I said. You didn't like them. I didn't want them. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I know. I'm not good at this. At knowing what people want. I thought, €, he stopped. Took a breath. I thought if I gave you enough things, you'd understand that I miss you. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and unexpected. You don't miss me, I said, but my voice was softer than I intended. You miss having me. There's a difference. Is there? Julian leaned forward. Explain it to me. Because I've spent the last month trying to understand why I can't sleep, why I can't focus, why I keep coming to this terrible coffee shop with its mediocre Wi-Fi and its overpriced pastries. And the only explanation I have is that the person I want to be with is here. Not in my penthouse. Not in my bed. Here. Serving coffee and dyeing his hair blue and smiling at strangers in a way he never smiled at me. My heart was beating too fast. I never smiled at you because you never gave me anything to smile about. Julian flinched. Actually flinched, like I'd physically struck him. I know, he said quietly. I know that now. I treated you terribly, Elias. I took your love and I treated it like an inconvenience. I made you feel small because I was afraid of how big you made me feel. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for another chance. I'm just asking. He reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope. My stomach dropped €1, not the termination letter, please, not that €1, but he opened it and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a handwritten letter. Julian's handwriting, precise and elegant, filling the page. "I'm asking you to read this," he said. "Not now. When you're ready. And if you never want to see me again after that, I'll stop coming. I'll stop sending gifts. I'll leave you alone. But I needed you to know that I see you. The real you. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." He stood up, gathered his things, and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. My name €1, Elias €1, written in Julian's careful hand. Not Eli. Elias. The person I'd been. The person I was trying not to be anymore. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. I read the letter at 2 a.m., 3 days later. I'd tried to ignore it. I'd put it in a drawer under my socks, as if burying it would make it disappear. But it sat there like a seed, growing roots into my thoughts, until I finally gave up and pulled it out. Elias. Asterisk, I'm not good at apologies. I'm not good at emotions in general. You know this. You spent 2 years watching me fail at basic human connection, and you loved me anyway. That fact haunts me more than anything else I've ever done. Asterisk. Asterisk, I thought love was weakness. I thought needing someone was a liability. My father taught me that love is leverage, affection is ammunition, and the only person you can trust is yourself. I believed it. I built my entire life around it. And then you came along, soft and stubborn and impossibly kind, and you looked at me like I was worth loving despite all my sharp edges. Asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't know what to do with that. So I hurt you. I pushed you away before you could leave me, because leaving was inevitable, wasn't it? Everyone leaves eventually. My mother died. My father discarded me when I stopped being useful. The people I trusted betrayed me for profit. Of course you would leave too. Of course you would realize I wasn't worth the effort. Asterisk. Asterisk, so I made the decision for you. I prepared the termination letter before you could disappoint me. I told myself it was efficiency. It wasn't. It was cowardice. Asterisk. And then you left first. Asterisk, you have no idea how that felt. To walk into my home and find you gone. To realize that you'd seen through me seen the ending I had planned and simply opted out. No tears. No begging. Just a note and an empty closet. Asterisk. Asterisk, I was furious. Then I was confused. Then, slowly, horribly, I was ashamed. Asterisk. Asterisk, because you were right to leave. I gave you every reason to go and no reason to stay. I treated your love like a burden and your devotion like a debt. I made you smaller so I wouldn't have to face how empty I was. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not asking you to come back. I don't deserve that. I'm not even asking you to forgive me, though I hope someday you might. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm asking you to know that I see you now. The blue in your hair. The way you remember customers' names. The life you're building without me. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. And I'm sorry I was too broken to see it when it mattered. Asterisk. Asterisk, if you ever need anything anything at all I'm here. Not as your keeper. Not as your boss. Just as someone who finally understands what he lost. Asterisk. Julian. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I cried. Not the broken, desperate crying of Elias Vane, abandoned lover. Something quieter. Something that felt like letting go and holding on at the same time. Julian had never written me a letter before. Julian had never apologized before. Julian had never admitted weakness, fear, or love because that's what this was, wasn't it? Not love the way he'd understood it, as possession and control. But love as recognition. As regret. As the willingness to be seen. I didn't know what to do with it. I still didn't trust him. One letter didn't erase 2 years of neglect, no matter how beautifully written. But something had shifted. The Julian I'd known the villain of the novel, cold and cruel and untouchable had cracked open, and a real person was looking out. I fell asleep with the letter on my pillow and dreamed of a different story. One where the king didn't despise his husband. One where the alpha cherished his omega. One where love wasn't a transaction but a choice, made again every day. When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I texted Julian the next morning. Not from my old number €1. I destroyed that SIM card weeks ago. I used the prepaid phone, the one he'd never had the number for, and typed. Asterisk coffee. Saturday. 8 a.m. Just coffee, asterisk. His response came in 30 seconds. I'll be there. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. I wore the leather jacket and a sweater that was actually mine, bought with my own money from a thrift store. No designer labels. No carefully curated elegance. Just me. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same corner table. He stood when he saw me €1, an old habit, politeness drilled into him by expensive schools €1, and waited until I sat down before following suit. You came, he said. I said I would. I wasn't sure. He paused. I've been wrong about a lot of things. A waitress came by. I ordered coffee €1, the Guatemalan, because it had grown on me. Julian ordered the same. I read your letter, I said. He went very still. And it was beautiful. And it doesn't change anything. And it changes everything. I wrapped my hands around my mug. I don't know how to do this, Julian. I don't know how to be the person who forgives you. I'm not even sure I want to be that person. You hurt me. Not just at the end €1, every day, in small ways, until I didn't recognize myself anymore. I know. And I can't go back to that. I won't. If this €1, whatever this is €1, if it goes anywhere, it has to be different. I have to be different. I have to be someone who exists outside of your orbit, with my own life and my own friends and my own apartment that I pay for myself. I understand. And you have to be different too. You have to actually talk to me. You have to ask what I want instead of assuming. You have to be. I searched for the word. Vulnerable. Which I know is basically your worst nightmare. Julian looked down at his coffee. It is, he admitted. But you're worth it. If you'll let me try. The rain started then, tapping against the window, blurring the city into watercolor. I watched Julian's face €1, the tension in his jaw, the hope he was trying to hide, the fear he probably didn't even recognize as fear. We can try, I said slowly. But slowly. Very slowly. Coffee dates. Conversations. No penthouse, no gifts, no assumptions. We start from 0. 0, Julian repeated. I can do 0. And if you hurt me again €1, even a little, even accidentally €1, I'm gone. No note this time. Just gone. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I won't. You can't promise that. I can promise to try. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. He reached across the table, palm up, an offering. Elias €1, Eli €1, I spent 2 years with you and never learned who you were. Give me the chance to know you now. The real you. The coffee shop you. The blue hair and the leather jacket and the terrible foam art. I stared at his hand. Then, slowly, I placed mine in it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady. It felt different from before €1, not possessive, not controlling. Just present. A choice, made in real time, by 2 people who were trying. Okay, I said. But I'm keeping the apartment. Julian smiled. It was small, hesitant, nothing like the confident smirks I was used to. It was better. Keep the apartment, he said. Keep the job. Keep everything that makes you happy. I just want to be part of it. Even a small part. We'll see, I said. But I didn't pull my hand away. I texted Julian the next morning. Not from my old number €1. I destroyed that SIM card weeks ago. I used the prepaid phone, the one he'd never had the number for, and typed. Asterisk coffee. Saturday. 8 a.m. Just coffee, asterisk. His response came in 30 seconds. I'll be there. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. I wore the leather jacket and a sweater that was actually mine, bought with my own money from a thrift store. No designer labels. No carefully curated elegance. Just me. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same corner table. He stood when he saw me €1, an old habit, politeness drilled into him by expensive schools €1, and waited until I sat down before following suit. You came, he said. I said I would. I wasn't sure. He paused. I've been wrong about a lot of things. A waitress came by. I ordered coffee €1, the Guatemalan, because it had grown on me. Julian ordered the same. I read your letter, I said. He went very still. And it was beautiful. And it doesn't change anything. And it changes everything. I wrapped my hands around my mug. I don't know how to do this, Julian. I don't know how to be the person who forgives you. I'm not even sure I want to be that person. You hurt me. Not just at the end €1, every day in small ways, until I didn't recognize myself anymore. I know. And I can't go back to that. I won't. If this €1, whatever this is €1, if it goes anywhere, it has to be different. I have to be different. I have to be someone who exists outside of your orbit, with my own life and my own friends and my own apartment that I pay for myself. I understand. And you have to be different too. You have to actually talk to me. You have to ask what I want instead of assuming. You have to be. I searched for the word. Vulnerable. Which I know is basically your worst nightmare. Julian looked down at his coffee. It is, he admitted. But you're worth it. If you'll let me try. The rain started then, tapping against the window, blurring the city into watercolor. I watched Julian's face €1, the tension in his jaw, the hope he was trying to hide, the fear he probably didn't even recognize as fear. We can try, I said slowly. But slowly. Very slowly. Coffee dates. Conversations. No penthouse, no gifts, no assumptions. We start from 0. 0, Julian repeated. I can do 0. And if you hurt me again €1, even a little, even accidentally €1, I'm gone. No note this time. Just gone. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I won't. You can't promise that. I can promise to try. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. He reached across the table, palm up, an offering. Elias €1, Eli €1, I spent 2 years with you and never learned who you were. Give me the chance to know you now. The real you. The coffee shop you. The blue hair and the leather jacket and the terrible foam art. I stared at his hand. Then, slowly, I placed mine in it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady. It felt different from before €1, not possessive, not controlling. Just present. A choice, made in real time, by 2 people who were trying. Okay, I said. But I'm keeping the apartment. Julian smiled. It was small, hesitant, nothing like the confident smirks I was used to. It was better. Keep the apartment, he said. Keep the job. Keep everything that makes you happy. I just want to be part of it. Even a small part. We'll see, I said. But I didn't pull my hand away. 3 months after the coffee shop meeting, Julian kissed me. It wasn't planned. We were walking through the park near my apartment €1, a habit we developed, Saturday coffee followed by a stroll €1, and it had started to rain, the same soft drizzle as our first real conversation. Julian had pulled me under a tree, laughing €1, actually laughing, a sound I was still getting used to €1, and we'd stood there, close enough to share warmth, close enough to see the raindrops caught in his eyelashes. Eli, he said, and his voice was rough. Julian, may I kiss you? The question shocked me. Julian had never asked before. In our previous life, he'd simply taken €1, my time, my attention, my body €1, with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. Now he was asking. Waiting. Vulnerable. I looked at him €1, really looked €1, and saw not the villain of a novel, not the cold CEO, not the man who had broken my heart. I saw Julian. Flawed, trying, mine if I wanted him. Yes, I whispered. He cupped my face with both hands, thumbs brushing my cheekbones, and kissed me like I was something precious. Like I was glass and gold and everything he'd ever wanted but was afraid to break. It was different from before. Slower. Deeper. Full of everything we'd never said and everything we were still learning. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. The rain had soaked through our clothes, but neither of us cared. I love you, Julian said. Not the way I loved you before €1, as an object, a possession. I love you as you are. Independent. Stubborn. blue-haired. Completely out of my league. I laughed, surprised by the tears in my eyes. You're ridiculous. I'm yours, he corrected. If you'll have me. I kissed him again, because words felt insufficient, because some things could only be said with touch. I love you too, I said against his lips. But I'm keeping the apartment. He smiled, wide and unguarded, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Keep the apartment, he said. Keep everything. Just keep me too. ##### Chapter 14, Epilogue A different story. 1 year later, I opened my Kafka copyright. It was small, just like I'd imagined exposed brick, local art, a bookshelf in the corner. I called it Second Chapter because that's what this was. Not a sequel. A rewrite. Julian was there on opening day, wearing an apron that said barista in training and making lattes with foam art that was somehow even worse than mine. He'd taken a step back from Ashford Group, delegating more, traveling less. He still worked too much, still struggled with vulnerability, still occasionally tried to solve problems with money. But he was here. He showed up. Every day, he chose to be the person I needed him to be. And every day, I chose to let him. That was the difference, I think. In the novel, Elias had loved without boundaries, without reciprocity, without self-respect. He'd been a tragic plot device, existing only to highlight Julian's cruelty. But I wasn't Elias anymore. I was Eli Ayuro, barista, entrepreneur, survivor, lover. A person who had walked away from a gilded cage and built a life on his own terms. Julian wasn't the villain anymore, either. He was just a man. Flawed, complicated, trying. A man who had learned that love wasn't about control, and that the people who loved you weren't obligations to be managed, but gifts to be cherished. Sometimes customers asked how we met. Julian would say, he left me before I could ruin everything. Best thing that ever happened to me. I would say, I packed my bags and never looked back. Until I was ready to look forward. Both were true. The story didn't end with a wedding or a dramatic reconciliation. It ended if stories ever really end with two people choosing each other, not out of desperation or habit, but because they'd finally learned how. And that, I think, is the happiest ending of all. The end. Thank you for listening to Second Chapter. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and comment below which MC vibe do you prefer, the one who leaves first or the one who learns to love better. Until next time, besties, keep writing your own stories.